Yes.
All right, welcome everybody. Come on in, grab something to drink, grab a snack, come sit down, we'll get started. All righty, welcome. My name is Eli Storch. I chair the Design Advocacy Group. It's wonderful to have you guys here. This is not technically a monthly meeting. We're calling this a special event because we have access to a steering committee member who has a big interesting project we want to talk about. So, as we do when we're all in person, we're going to go around the room, introduce ourselves, and today's little tidbit, let's do favorite public space in Philadelphia. So let's start back there. Pointed at you. Your name and your favorite public place in Philadelphia.
What about maybe you like to see? Okay. Definitely good.
All right.
I'm Lexi. I think my favorite public space is and often do the woodlands count as a public space? Sure. That's my favorite.
Okay. Thank you. Keep parking out. Mike Wick,
See, man, I heard my answer went from top, so. Let's
I have Leary, Nathan Park. Hero got me from depending on the market. I'm all. George Floyd, Schuylkill River Trail.
Ellen Wright, I've seen Washington. I'm Susanna Edgar. One of my favorites is Lemon Hill.
ATO, no right part.
Dean Wells, Reading Terminal Market. No? Ryan Hommel, Porch. Nancy Buster, Ryan Park. And Ryan. They don't want all the farmers these. Good Rob. I'm gonna say it over the same.
Was Dollar Josie, I'm gonna say Red House.
and then I have. Take care of I'll take the break for a moment. Yeah. And we all I live at the edge of the park in West Philadelphia with my favorite dog.
Wonderful. Well, thank you. I'm a Clark Park person myself, so thank you all for coming, for being here. A little bit about our meeting. We are being recorded. We are on the record. DAG used to not be on the record, but now with Zoom, with the ability to record and share this a little bit further and wider and keep record, we are on record and recording. So if you go on our website, going back to early COVID, there's lots of videos and sessions on there that you can check out. See what we've been up to, all the various projects that we've had come and present. At this point, if anyone has any upcoming exhibitions, advocacy items, things you just want to tell us all about, raise your hand, feel free. I will give you the mic to share a little bit. I also have advocacy items of my own, so think about it for a minute. DAG is composing our statement on the UART's, call it a crisis. That'll be out in the next few days. I know there a few people have reached out about when we'd have a response. It is in editing and will be up very soon on our website. So there'll be more to come on that. We also asked everybody for their 2026 Philadelphia wish list, all the great ideas for projects and things that folks wanted to see for the 250th. Those have all been compiled. Thanks to everyone who shared with us. And we're going to put those up next week on our website for review, for voting, for sharing. If one of them hits you and you want to get really involved, we'll set you up with Michael Newmas. You guys can talk and make it happen. So look for that in our e-blast and on our website coming next week. From there, we are doing a little summer study in DAG on the issue of the Philadelphia bus station. Angus Saffron had a really wonderful piece about what's going on now on 30th Street and the city's study that DVRPC is funding, correct? Okay, good. Patty knows all. So that is happening in West Philadelphia. So as DAG, we're trying to keep the conversation going and are doing a little look at the Roundhouse and seeing how that might work as a bus station, just as a means of keeping the conversation going and hopefully pushing for a solution that is actionable. So more to come on that one there. I also wanted to mention the Lemon Hill fan zone for the World Cup. That's been announced. There's going to be a lot of development and news around there. We'll be keeping an eye on that and how that develops. So keep your eyes peeled and see what comes of that, because we need a lot of big open spaces to put a lot of people during the World Cup. So that has been selected. And there will be a lot of work around making that an accessible, useful space. So anybody, you think of anything you want to share? Now's the moment. Okay. Well, then I will jump into, Patrick.
I was trying to refer to since several people mentioned for Dick Drive, which fails, let me tell you right now, we are looking at the potential of $200 million on Pennsylvania transportation program for circuit trail development. And if you go to circuittrails.org, there's an opportunity to voice your support to build more trails. This is a huge breakthrough that we've been working on for 2 years. Patty knows all about it. Patty, there she is. DVRPC has it up on their website. Biggest investment carbon, which is carbon reduction in transportation in trails in the nation. Okay, so go to circuittrails.org, support this. Deadline is Monday, 5 p.m. Hold that website one time, circuittrails.org.
Thank you very much.
We're just building out Bob Thomas's legacy. That's what it's. That can happen.
Any others at this point? All right, keep it. So upcoming events at DAG, July 18th, these are all on Thursday. So July 18th, right here, Diana Lynn, author, policy person, planning person, urbanist, is going to give a talk called Designing the Culture of Recreation. Have a lot of major projects that are around sports and parks and recreation, and she's working to summarize those into an interesting talk that I'm very much looking forward to. And then on August 8th, the Pew Charitable Trust will be with us, and they will be releasing soon their study called Who's Buying Single-Family Homes in Philadelphia. We've had them a couple of years ago talking about rentership trends in Philadelphia. They're going to come and talk about home buying trends. It'll be a pretty interesting event. That is on Zoom at 10 o'clock in the morning, so you do have to register for that in order to get the Zoom link. We like that you register for the in-person, but you don't have to, obviously. And then on September 5th, a really interesting talk, Chris Haifa and Mark Hauser. They are architectural historians and architectural photographer documentarians who are giving a talk called High Rises Art Deco, Jazz Age Skyscrapers from a New Perspective. They're using drone and production technology to capture some really wonderful and unique imagery of some of our nation's tallest and most interesting buildings. So they're going to come there. They're going to have their book available to buy and sign and all that good stuff. It's going to be a lot of fun. So with that, let's jump into it. I'm going to introduce Nate Hommel, the boss of this project, and then he can take on and introduce the whole team. So I got to know Nate working on streeteries back in 2022. Nate has a long history working in public spaces and helping the city pilot the Parklet program. We pulled him into the DAG steering committee just to share his knowledge with us. And then he goes and presents the project that you are gonna learn more about tonight. So with that, Nate, I'll let you take it away and introduce the team and get into it.
Wonderful. So everybody can hear me, I hope. Hi, everybody. I'm Nate. I want to, you guys want to come on up. Talk to you about this wonderful team we are able to put together for those of you that have seen anything of this, what you've seen is a feasibility study. Could we even possibly do this thing? Are we crazy? That kind of thing. And so the leader of that group is the lead project lead on this is Tom, who have incredible experience of doing the Christian to Crescent cable stay bridge, numerous other projects in Philadelphia. We knew we had to have someone that had experience doing stuff in the Schuylkill River for active recreation. So we have Brian Belmont. Say hi, everybody.
How's that? That works a lot better. Good evening. Good to be here.
And we have Doug also from Tom.
Hello.
So humble. We have on our team, I think we have the global leader in ecological design, and that's Biohabitats out of Baltimore. And Chris is here representing Biohabitats.
Yeah, I'm Chris Strab. I'm an ecological engineer, and I'm up here from Baltimore. Trying to, the only real public spaces I know are the ones that I've gotten to work on here in the field, and they've all been wonderful spaces. So anyway.
And another one of our illustrious team members, Ignacio Buncerosa from the Collaborative.
Hi, and I'm a resident near Clark Park. That's why I promoted Clark Park today. I'm a landscape architect.
And lastly, we have planner and pool guru, Ben.
Brian?
There you
Oh, you can't see me.
Ben Brian.
I'm back here. How's it going, everybody?
So this team was put together long time ago in 2020, right before the world changed. And so for 2 years, we sat in our various Zoom rooms all across sort of the Eastern Seaboard and figured out what could we do? What is this dream of ours of how do we get people access to the Schuylkill River? How can we bring folks to the river that famously by the Dutch was named the Hidden River. And so how can we get people to this river? West Philadelphia community shaped by the river, very few West Philadelphians have access to it. And so we started dreaming and we started thinking about what was possible. And so again, this is a feasibility study. And what I urged all of them to do is when we talk to the entities, the power, the people that have the power about these things, Coast Guard, those types of things, I said, please do not ask for permission. I just need a maybe. I just need to know if we're crazy. Don't ask them to say yes. That's really hard to do. I just want to know if we're nuts and this isn't going to work. And so as far as I know, no one said you're nuts, get the hell out of here. So yay to us on this idea. But historically, this area where we're suggesting, back in the early 1800s, this map of the beautiful sepia tones, thought that there's a market square in this location, almost exactly where we're proposing our project. And so there's just something about the Philadelphia grid that said this is the place where something should be. This is how we get across the river. There's been lots of studies over the years. I've been fortunate to be on these teams when Amtrak did their big plan of how can we reimagine the station. Just north of where we're proposing our project, Amtrak wanted to have short access down to the Schuylkill to bring folks down as part of their big dream. Ignacio put together this wonderful sketch that you can see on the right there with the green dots. Those are significant public spaces in Philadelphia. The original 4 squares, now the 5th square is Dilworth. Soon, all the way to the right of this image on the Delaware River, we're going to have the Penn's Landing cap. And the purple square represents where the West Philly Waterfront is. So it starts to feel like it completes a cycle that started with the original 5 squares, now with big parks on the water's edge. And so that's the most important piece. But so this idea, these things have been around. There's been a long time of folks thinking something should happen in this little chunk of the Schuylkill, and we're sort of coming in on it now. And I think this image, this figure ground image, shows you some of that development. My job normally is Director of Planning and Design at University City District. So we are really focused on all the development that's happening on our eastern edge, the city's west edge. And so right along the Schuylkill on the west side, there is an incredible influx of life science related development, towers popping up all over the place. Our yellow spot in the center there shows the potential waterfront location. To the east of our site, there has been a big boom in residential development. Doug can even give some more context to this, but there used to be no folks that lived around here. We first did the porch. People were like, have you talked to the community? We're like, who's the community? Nobody lives within blocks of this place. Now there's so many people that live within blocks of this area. And I think with some of this stuff, there's been lots of towers, lots of different things. There's sort of the high end of the market coming into that eastern edge. But point being, there are still folks coming to this area to bring some new energy 24 hours a day to help out with the existing trail network that's there. I'll pass it over to Doug.
Because one of the things that we asked ourselves was, is this the right place for this, right? It was something that we asked ourselves and continue to ask ourselves to this day, honestly, is this the right place? And when we would have these discussions, and just like when Nate was talking about, this started to feel like the center of a lot of important things that were happening, that we were seeing from the private market, that we're seeing from infrastructure investments. And yes, it's called the West Philly Waterfront, but acknowledging that, like, and part of that is obviously the connection to West Philly, but also that the Eastern Schuylkill has gotten a lot of the attention, a lot of the investment, especially around recreation and public spaces. A lot of people, myself included, mentioned Schuylkill Banks Trail as their favorite space. So this is kind of a known thing. Now with the added, residential and the kind of boom that's happening on both sides of the river, this started to make a lot of sense. And then I think on the next slide, we couldn't help but take a snapshot from the Philadelphia Business Journal, I think. Is it the next slide?
It's not advancing all of a sudden.
They had the crane watch, if anybody has used that on that site. It's basically here it is. So it's basically just, what's happening in Philadelphia. It's just kind of the general tracker of the, proposals of things. we were very proud of the last iteration when it went on there. That is our project, our proposed project right there. But you see just the kind of level of activity. And I would also, this, with their funny little icons here, at least hints at the diversity of development. This is not a one note kind of thing that's happening around the project. So more and more as we started talking about it, this started to make sense. And then we started to think, well, how are people getting there? Access obviously is a huge, important part of this. We want it to be a space that people can actually get to, not just use. So, it dawned on us, obviously, with this proximity to 30th Street Station, the bus routes, that, when you kind of zoom out, certainly when you zoom out far enough, you realize there's a lot of different ways, specifically from transit. And then when you fold in the Schuylkill Trail, the amount of people, the tens, hundreds of thousands of people annually that use bikes and walk on the trail, that the access to people essentially within a block of this site is pretty phenomenal and astronomical. So as a location, our confidence grew that this started to make a lot more sense. So again, this is something we revisit often, and people ask us a lot is why this site, but we wanted to kind of unpack a little bit, for all of you, what our thinking kind of process was behind this. So here in this image, you see obviously the idea that the connection to West Philadelphia in particular was the kind of impetus, the starting point of this, building off the success of the porch and spaces like it. And, as we started to think, and we'll talk about this later, about what would go on this space, started to think about what are the needs and desires, particularly of the West Philadelphia community. So understanding how this site is linked through, either major institutions, major access points, all of those sorts of things, builds to the case of why this site makes sense.
Yeah, and if this doesn't make sense to you, the top angle there is Lancaster Ave, used to be, that historic footpath to New York. Down, the one cutting down is Woodland Ave and Woodland Walk through the campuses. Schuylkill River Trail is shown here in the blue. Penn Park and all the other things that are connected. And so this sort of forms a loop there along Market Street where it connects an area that was sort of separated. But again, it's access on the west side of this, bringing folks in from far away to this point.
And one note too, if you don't, and maybe on the next slide it shows it, but when we zoom into this site in particular, so this one. So I'll just make the point, on the east side, this is where the scissor ramps are for the access down to the Schuylkill. So if you're on Chestnut or Market Street side, you can kind of take the ramps or stairs down. So as an idea of tapping into the hundreds of thousands of people that use the trail network there, this is the block where you can kind of go up or down from the trail. This is the kind of mirror on the west side. So even from that, again, reinforcing that this site seems to make a lot of sense.
Yeah, feels like the center in a lot of different ways.
And, yes. Can you hear me?
Yes.
So, as a resident using the space all the time, the one thing that is striking, this is one of the grayest and darkest parts of the entire river. And yet, the proportions, it was mentioned within a square, this is not unlike the size of a square. Both sides of the bridges. So this idea of creating something special when you need to build from that basic building block of Philadelphia was kind of ringing their ears. And so the challenge is great, but I think the opportunity.
I think one thing to take note of is just look at the distance between these buildings, and especially up here up on Schuylkill Avenue down to the river. It's a pretty significant drop. And I think what's kind of fascinating about this transition that we've had in urban planning is that this is a river that wanted to be sort of almost forgotten when it was built, right? They tried to choke this down, they tried to control the floods, control the floodplain, walk over the river, don't pay attention to the river. And so there's been this transition, and really it's, I think, a format of like social ecology, where rather than people being impediment to the actual ecosystem, it's gaining recognition, giving attention to this resource, recognizing that there is life in this river, that it actually fosters more care, better water quality, interventions that can help improve it. So I think that's, you know, a big challenge here. I mean, we're not gonna restore the Schuylkill based on this project, but we can start to draw attention to it. We can transition people's mindset so that they recognize the connectivity they have. So, to the ecology and all the communities that are up.
Yeah, I'll jump in. So when we started this process, as Nate mentioned, it started in the just before COVID. We were talking about it, and then we all got distracted for a little bit. But we all had some other things to take care of. But in the middle of the pandemic, we said it's time to get together and start to figure this out. We had a very frigid February site visit. You know, unlike today where it's quite warm. But we started, you know, all of these words that are up on the screen. These are the things that started to come to mind for all of us. And a lot of it came from Nate's vision. We were students of Nate for quite a while here, trying to understand what was possible. We kept asking things like, isn't this the hardest spot to do some of these things? And what came from that conversation was that it may be in some respects, but that's exactly why we need to do it here. Because it's also the place where you have the greatest amount of visibility, and it's where people already are. We're moving back and forth across those bridges already. It's where we have the greatest ability to connect east and west. And that's where we need people to be able to gather. And, you know, the question was, who's it for? It's for everyone. It's one of our strongest goals. And if we're not achieving it yet, let us know. That this needs to be an inclusive, welcoming place for everyone. It cannot come a club. It cannot be a private club. It cannot be something that people feel like is not for them. And that is, as we all know, a lot harder to do than it sounds, especially when we have to take care of some of the physical realities of this site. We know it's the right place, but it's going to be hard to meet that goal. So we're going to constantly be checking in with ourselves on whether we've met it. The other thing that's really important is, besides being able to actually connect people with their hidden river, as Chris mentioned, is to acknowledge the fact that the infrastructure that we all use, the roads and the rails, many of us use them to get here today, they did separate West Philly from its river, but they're critical. And it's that the infrastructure strength of West Philly was something we wanted to not apologize for, not try and erase, but try and create something that was at the scale and the level of importance of that infrastructure that you find in West Philly. So accentuate it and build onto it rather than try and erase it or remove it.
We weren't going to try and make 76 go away.
Yeah. So that means, okay, how are we going to get people on the east side of, there's not much between the road and the river. So that put us into the river. And we'll keep going here. As we said,
some of the challenges.
Yeah, it won't be easy. Things like, it's not just tidal, it's a 6-foot tide change. You know, a lot of the precedents that we gravitate towards.
How many people knew the Schuylkill was tidal, by the way? Okay, good.
Okay,
that's good.
Well, you know, you start to think about waterfront places where you can engage with the water that deal with tide change. I mean, that's a lot to deal with, right? Especially when it's a 6-foot change happening 30 feet below the street grade. When we started to come up with ideas that put people in contact with the water and started to get them close by, and Chris reminded us that water is not moving slowly.
Not during a storm event.
During a storm event, it's moving fast enough that it's an incredibly dangerous thing to touch. So one of the things that we're supposed to make sure we really say is this is not a water park. It is a park on the waterfront. And we're not talking about people swimming in the river. There's lots of reasons why that's not the project of the moment. Starting to get people to think about an aspiration for the river to be clean enough to do so is one thing. We're very interested in that. But just the physical nature of the forces moving through the water there is something to be dealt with. But then we also have all the surrounding context with PennDOT and the SEPTA egress that comes out of the subway, sneaks out of the, if you ever have to, heaven forbid, evacuate the train, you're going to end up on our waterfront.
Well, it's under the Schuylkill. There's a door right there under the Market Street Bridge and a walkway for you to exit.
Yeah, so there's things like that you know, we have not just multiple jurisdictions to deal with, but the fact that they actually have critical pieces of their mission that this place needs to accommodate. You know, we are in the floodplain. We're in the floodway. we do not take that lightly at all. We didn't take it lightly at all when we were doing the Schuylkill River Trail farther south, where we're building in the river and in the floodway. We'll get to how we've addressed that, but yeah, it's not like we were surprised by, oh wait, this is in the floodway. No, it was a very real challenge from the beginning that we needed to think about. And I think one of the key elements here is part of being inclusive and welcoming. There's what the ADA has to say about that, and there's what barrier-free design has to say about that. And there's very real dimensions that drove a lot of our design thinking. A lot of ideas we explored that were complicated by those rules and regulations. But then there's just the general idea that you want people to intuitively be welcomed in and drawn into the place. And so that's kind of, there are opportunities and challenges.
Yeah. Where do emergency vehicles park? Where do food trucks park?
That's right.
All those fun things.
So we've been working on this for a while, and we have thought about a lot of different things, some of which will show you some of the examples of things that didn't quite make the cut. But we really feel like we've arrived at the beginning. This really is the dawn of public engagement around this particular idea and the starting point for refining and even defining the design expression and idea here. So we want to make sure that we're really clear about that. While we have thought quite a bit about it, we don't feel like we have every answer. And we're going to need to talk to quite a few stakeholders and the public in general over the next year to better define the problems we're trying to solve and the solutions to solve them. So, but I think the important thing about what we're showing here, we're going to talk about all the different components of it and the why there. But we wanted to have many different types of activity to be supported. We wanted people to be able to just walk through and on their way to the train station. We wanted people to be drawn in who found it and be able to sit in the shade. Or we wanted people to be able to cool off on the first 105-degree day of the year, unfortunately being in June. We wanted the beach idea for people to recreate in a different way. We wanted to think about ways we could connect the water, bring the water up, filter it, and send that message throughout the watershed. We wanted to have places where you would get a different perspective on the city around you. Where sometimes you get that by going up in the air to the tops of buildings. You can get that by being on the river. We tried to find a halfway point there. So the idea of these two fundamental decks that overlap with each other had quite a bit of functional benefit in the ramps and the stairs and the slides that connect people between levels. But it also gives you the choice of what place is drawing you that day. Are you just moving through on the top? Are you trying to see the ballet of the people enjoying themselves, or are you actually going to get wet and cool off? You wanted a place that accommodated many people and all of the different activities they might be interested in.
And we talk a lot about shade as equity. As cities get hotter, we feel like it's a basic human right to have access to free shade. And along rivers, that's always going to be a little bit cooler than the rest of the city. There's always going to be a little bit of a breeze. And so it's going to help with the temperatures a little bit. And so just having a simple place you could be and not be scorching hot and not have to pay for it was a big part of our design directive.
Absolutely. And it'll be a little bit more evident in some of the other images. But one of the struggles that we had is we want people to feel like they can just walk right in and be welcome. But we also realized from our discussions with PennDOT that we can't erase the entire freshly built parapet along Schuylkill Avenue and just have the space bleed directly out into ours. We needed to connect strategically. And right now we're showing 3 points. Perhaps it's more in the future. But that's one of those ideas that we're going to be tuning going forward. Also in our discussions, Jules Dingle from Digshaw couldn't be here tonight because he's at a project in Rhode Island. But he kind of captured this moment where we were evolving. We were making a pretty significant design pivot from something that floated in the river to something that sat above it, when it kind of dawned on us that throughout West Philadelphia, you have the railroad and the roadway and the city life above, creating a dialogue, right? There's a city below and a city above, and it's not always in the best alignment. There's not always the greatest relationship between those ideas. But we have the opportunity here to take that West Philadelphia idea a little bit farther east, but make it a really great relationship between the river and the multiple levels in this new public space. So the idea of creating a new kind of analog between the above and the below that actually retroactively makes the rest of the eastern edge of West Philly better. This image is a really important one because we were using it to actually that he kind of designed from within the view to try and think about the kinds of relationship we wanted to create. It does look a little bit weird to see these people kind of floating on what looks like these concrete Swiss cheese type plates. But the whole idea is that's how we want to make sure people who are at the top level can still perceive the river below them and the people at these different levels. So lots of technical details to work out about how those porthole type ideas work. But the importance of light coming through and the visibility of the people and the river below at different levels is quite important. We're also thinking about the verbs, right? You want to think about the verbs as long as you can in a design project before you start to talk about nouns. And the idea of birthday parties and celebrations and watching Phillies games and World Cup viewing if you're not at Lemon Hill. These are the kinds of things that we wanted people to be able to do here. Get something to eat, use the restroom, enjoy the water features, and have this new perspective of the city that you don't get. Be in the shade if you want, be in the sun if you want. And that level below is really important. We do have 30 feet to work with from the top of Schuylkill Avenue to the, roughly where the river fluctuates. We've figured out how we can get people tastefully down about 12 feet of that. So we do have a great space below this main deck at any tide level to kayak and then to enjoy and to allow light and air to get through there. So that's not just the underside of this part. That's a whole nother landscape for us to think about the design of together.
Yeah, and building off the Schuylkill River Trail and what they've been, SRDC has been doing of getting people to kayak on the river, making it a thing again. This is a new destination that they can row to.
Right, and we all know that like there's tipping points where suddenly it's like you get more than one place to connect to, and suddenly people do it all the time. There's this lovely colors on the left-hand side there where the highway is. The idea with that is that there's an amazing opportunity for an art installation that does many different things. Number one, it can provide some really great inspiration and visual character. And Ignacio will talk a little bit more about the role of art in our waterfronts here in a little bit. But there's also PennDOT loved it. PennDOT was like, oh, thank goodness, people won't be able to throw stuff at the cars.
That was the kind of maybe I was looking for.
We're like, okay, yeah, great. That's exactly why we did that.
That was part of our design, yes.
There's also been talks about, well, is it going to be really loud at this space? Are you going to hear the deafening roar of vehicles? Well, there's going to be, sound attenuation could be part of this. We think there's going to be more of a white noise effect. We could be a little biased at this point, but we think there's going to be more of a white noise effect there. But there's the idea that you could actually have this some dynamic movement there and really have the edge of the highway be part of why this is a great experience, not a detriment to it. And I think, starting to think about that whole square from east to west, and you can kind of see the scissoring ramps on the east side. Again, if this is sort of that central quad where you can approach it from all sides and you can ride your bike up from the south and you can come across and enjoy this space and go back, and there can be a dialogue from east to west between one of the most important parts along the Schuylkill banks and the east here. I think, it starts to also try and capture that idea of engaging with the kind of 100% corner there by the train station at Market and Schuylkill, where people can come in and look out over the river and enjoy it, not just sort of realize they're crossing something halfway across the bridge. And again, we're going to talk more about the individual components here and why they're all there. But the water feature, the pool element, and what that can be as a magnet for people who want to be in it or next to it or just look down from above. Again, it's the kind of place that you can inhabit all day, or you can just appreciate it as you move by as part of your daily life. We got to enjoy the pandemic and how that influenced our design process, and then we got to enjoy Tropical Storm Ida and how that influenced our design process. We had literally just, through our engineers, proven the concept that we could have a public space supported by 2 barges that was anchored by a rather robust system that would allow that barge to move up and down. And it would be a really, really strong mechanical system that would hold it in place. And we were feeling pretty good about that. And then all the water came down.
A 400-year storm hit us.
Yeah, and while we had proven to ourselves that it would have withstood that storm, it seemed a little tone deaf to continue along a design angle that would have been thumbing its nose at Mother Nature in that way, tempting her maybe a little bit. And it was also something that, you know, we had to get all the way down to that water level. We'll show you some other drawings in a minute. Most of the space was taken up with ramps. Like it was all about getting down there, not being there. And so we started to pivot our idea to bring it up and make it more of a fixed public space that didn't have as many hinges, as many moving parts. It was much less of a contraption.
And couldn't become dislodged to knock down a bridge.
That never happens. Oh, wait a minute.
Oops, sorry, Chris, that's too soon.
It does happen. It even happened on this river. The barge that was working on one of the bridges.
True. One of the dredging barges during Ida found itself up on Schuylkill banks.
But if the diagrams on the right there, they try and at least highlight how this place is imagined relative to the different water levels. So we have a 6-foot tide change. So when we're at -2 at low tide, you know, that water's pretty far down there. But it comes up 6 feet. And at that point, you're at what, +4, and our deck is somewhere around 22. Important that we've built these, we've imagined these decks at the scale of West Philadelphia buildings, the scale of West Philadelphia spaces, and West Philadelphia infrastructure. So that's kind of one of the reasons, anytime we drew something a lot smaller, we couldn't meet as many of these goals, and it started to just disappear against the scale of West Philadelphia's strength, really.
So even a high tide and a 500-year flood, the water does not go over the parapet.
That's right. So we could handle more than Ida gave us, and this would still remain dry. We wish it could somehow protect all of West Philadelphia from flooding. It cannot do that. It is not meant to be. It is resilient to a certain level of flooding. It is not going to protect the rest of West Philly. That's going to have to take a different kind of approach. But it very much helped us shape the idea. And, you know, this is just a part of the collage of ideas that we considered throughout our Zoom connectivity and Miro boards.
Miro, if you guys hadn't used that, that was our saving grace during the pandemic.
Yes, we were able to think up a lot of things and talk about them as a group from many different locations. And, you know, you can kind of see some of these ideas really did explore getting all the way down to the river in different ways. How we could get steps down there for people to kayaks to dock and that kind of thing. And there's still opportunities to think about those things, but we really did feel much better about the fixed deck solution in whatever form it ends up taking, because it was able to meet almost all of our goals really well without encumbering some of the challenges.
We had gone far. We were researching barges to buy in Louisiana. How would they get dragged up the Schuylkill?
You can buy a 500-foot long barge for like 50 grand if you can get it here from Louisiana.
You just got to move it. They'll pretty much give it to you.
But you can't buy two. We needed two.
But yeah, then I had to have the awkward situation. Hey, crew, this needs to be on land, or my boss says we can't go further with it.
I'm going to pass it down to Ben and Ignacio to talk a little bit more about the water and the art.
Yeah, as I mentioned, I mean, this is such a gray and dark place, and Philadelphia, of course, leads the world in public art in so many different ways and different programs. And it's striking that the city between the rivers doesn't have that much of it in terms of public art that really talks and engages people directly on the water. So the opportunity here, I mean, you can see things have been done in other cities. Remind you of the city of Chicago. The San Francisco Bayfront is full of public art. And I think the opportunity here to just bring life and color and activity, that centerpiece there, I don't know if you know where it is. That beach is in the middle of Detroit, in Campus Martius. It's not the waterfront, but you can imagine what it might mean to be on the water in this idea of a different kind of recreation area that doesn't exist. Next.
And the ways that you touch that water. I mean, that slide showed there's a variety of ways that you could touch the water here, whether it's ankle deep stuff like at Sister Cities Park, whether it's a spray ground, whether it's a pool that you could swim in. And I think that's something that's like up for exploration as we start the community engagement process. The important thing about having that interaction with the water as part of this is that is the heat aspect of it. And I mean, there's Exhibit A is like right outside this door. It should not be this hot this early in the summer. And everything I've read says we're going to have like another really hot summer with many heat waves. And that's a real problem. It in many different ways. And it's a big equity challenge too. There is a shade equity issue in our cities. High poverty neighborhoods have 25% less tree canopy on average than others. And that's not a problem that's easy that's easy to solve quickly. They're much hotter as well. There's a big swimming equity issue that is tied with race, and that follows a long history of discrimination and underinvestment in neighborhoods of color in terms of who has access to swimming pools. And then these next two stats come from a study called the Beat the Heat study, which focused on Hunting Park, which is one of the hottest neighborhoods in the city of Philadelphia. The survey was done in 2018, but the stats are striking and I think universally relevant. There they found that 77% of residents felt too hot inside of their homes during heat events. And these are people, many of which who have air conditioning already, but they still feel too hot in their home. And I think maybe most striking for this audience is there's a real public life equity challenge embedded here. That same study found that when it is very hot outside, only a quarter of residents prefer to leave their homes to stay cool. So what does that do to our public life? What does that do to people's ability to enjoy public spaces and just enjoy summer? Summer should be fun. Kids should be outside. People should be meeting their neighborhoods or their neighbors outside. And how can they do that if they feel like they can't go outside or can't go to a public space because there's no shade and it's too hot and no way to cool off? All of these problems are obviously way bigger than this one project. And I guess as a planner and urban designer, my mind kind of went to this scale, not to the site scale. And I think one of the things that's exciting about this is trying to figure out how this project fits in to a larger network of cooling assets that are in the city of Philadelphia that also need their own funding and investment. But this network includes public pools, it includes spray grounds, it includes senior centers, libraries, places indoors and outdoors where you can go to stay cool. So how does this site add value within this network? We know it's in an accessible location to a lot of the city via public transportation, which is a big strength. But what does this design ultimately become? And how does it create something that really complements all of these other assets? Because unfortunately, this network is going to become much, much, much more important over the years. And this is a bit more of a destination space than your typical rec center pool or your typical rec center spray ground. But that's still very important. It's important to have these destination spaces that are really special and unique spots to go to on the weekend with your friends, with your family, and enjoy a different type of experience. And we have a couple of precedents here that are easy to think of. Dilworth Park in front of City Hall, or Sister Cities Park, which is just a couple blocks up couple of blocks up the Benjamin Franklin Parkway. Neither of these places are traditional pools or spray grounds, but they offer a day-long experience. They offer something special and different. And they offer ways to interact with water, to be in the shade and cool off. And part of the reason that they can do that is that it's not just about that water feature, but it is about a whole day long experience. So I went to Sister Cities Park yesterday because our toddler's school was closed. And there is a great water feature there. But it was easy to be there for 3 hours. We could have easily been there longer if it wasn't his nap time and he was getting tired, because there was plenty of shade. I was barely ever in the sun. We had the ankle deep water, which was nice. There were bathrooms, really critical. There were places to go outside and eat lunch. There's a cafe there. So you can really make like a day at the beach out of that experience, which I think is a big opportunity here.
And I think for those of you that know Dilworth, that is one of the most diverse parks you can imagine. The user groups of socioeconomic value differences, race differences. And so that connection of water being the demand good, folks can access it from anywhere with a simple subway, trolley, bus ride, and you can get into this place and be there for many hours, not have to pay a fee. All of those things are going to become more and more important as our cities get hotter and hotter. I think Chris can tell us a little bit about water and.
Yeah, so first off, it was very gratifying that most of you knew that the system was tidal here.
Yeah, congrats. Smart group.
Yeah, very, very good. And so, I mean, I think this notion of, the location, again, kind of draws us back into this idea of leveraging, the population. Doug was pulling up some data on the bike trail system, and really the Schuylkill River on the east side, it's an order of magnitude higher trail traffic than anywhere else in Philly. I mean, just the traffic.
Nearly a million people a year.
Yeah, left, going west and, west to east, east to west, and all around the train station. And so this central hub of activity, and using that as a means of really like not only revealing the river, but like seeding the public, like where we are in the watershed. And, if we follow the river and we start downstream, of course, there's this tidal, industrial type of system. And really at this moment, we're in a period of transition where, the urban population needs a place for respite, for shade, for, engaging with some kind of nature, even if it's a very modified nature. But all this, the city is actually supported in part by this watershed. And, so if we look upstream, that's what I think people often think about with rivers. Again, this is a continuum though, and using this position in the landscape as an opportunity to draw attention and demonstrate, either with pedagogic, interventions that really teach the importance of water to the city, while creating this great space. I mean, that I think is part of the goal of this project.
Thinking about it as ecological infrastructure, as social infrastructure, is pretty important. And I think, but the concept of fun infrastructure, you can say a lot about West Philly's waterfront today. Fun is probably not one of them, but a place that people can not only gather, but smile and enjoy each other's company. I mean, urban cities and public spaces need more slides, I think, in general. I think we'd all benefit from that. I don't think it would be a bad thing to smile more and slide more. So thinking about how elements that people think back to, when I was a kid and we went sliding on that slide down by that pool at the river, that's the kind of thing we're thinking about. What kind of memories can we actually create for parents and their kids along the way?
Yeah, there's that image of the Chicago River and the kind of color that we can bring into this experience. Could be an amazing attractor that also can have some of the functions of bringing light and noise reduction and things that are essential here through public art. The next one, you can click. Oh, sorry. How many of you remember the 100 orbs of light? I mean, that was just amazing. And it was here for what? 3 days. Completely changed the perception of the possibilities of the river. So you can imagine there's other artwork from Stacy Levy. that floats and reveals the function of water, the hydrology, the ecology. So all these things are possible here when you can begin to think big in terms of, what creates Philadelphia what it is in terms of recognition of community and art combined with its waterway. It's a possibility that hasn't been tapped yet.
And the 100 Oars of Light was in that same exact area between the Market Street Bridge and Chestnut Street bridges. For those 3 short days.
So some of the things we're also planning to do is explore quite a bit in the realm of sustainable construction techniques and ways in which the building process and the eventual product of it can either have a light imprint or maximize its social value along the way. So something that we've done in other waterfronts is starting to utilize the wedge process and some of the resources associated there to think about not just the technical sustainability issues, but the social value of the things that we're creating and the process through which we go about engaging with people to make sure that that waterfront is equitably designed, not just equitably built.
Wedge is sort of lead for waterfronts, if it's a new acronym for you.
Yeah, and it's something that we're using in some other waterfronts along the East Coast now, and we plan to test it out here too. And some of the other questions that we have along the way are, okay, if we need to build this out of robust materials that can withstand the flow of the Schuylkill, how do we do that with a low embodied carbon profile? And so again, some of the waterfronts that we're working on in New York right now, we're doing some alternatives analyses on the different ways we can change the embodied carbon profile through different types of construction techniques. So we'll be able to learn from that work and apply some of those lessons here as well. And the feedback so far has been
Turns out this is popular, making a lot of people talk and having a lot of fun. We've done so many different interviews the last month and a half. We first debuted this at our State of University City event in mid-April. Immediately we had a piece in the Inquirer that really got people thinking. And then this wonderful Instagram account, I don't know who runs it, but called Water Ice, started popping up with these hilarious memes. How do you just gotta love the idea of a guy with his swimmies waiting for the L underground to take it to the beach. Love the idea of Drake shunning Wildwoods, bring me to the West Philly waterfront. These just simple things of how it's getting people creative. It's making people think about the possibilities. It's like, what could it be? Could this be something fun? Could this be a way for folks that don't normally get to the shore to be able to get to a type of shore? That kind of stuff. And so I love that it's making people think, get people excited. And I'm a sucker for a good meme. So that's always a lot of fun. But that's to say, we have a lot of complicated things to resolve with this. And so, Ryan, why don't you run us through some of the things we have ahead of us?
Oh, yeah. I mean, we're no stranger to the critiques because we've had them ourselves. I think we've all had moments where what are we doing? What about this, and this? And that's the best part. It's almost like the concept of building a great place for people that connects them with the river and the broader community at this location is really what's captured our imaginations. But we understand, how it's governed, who owns it, who maintains it. I mean, fortunately, Nate's got a lot of experience in how to get some of these things done.
We've done this kind of thing for a while. And so the idea, hopefully, this is something we can work in partnership with bigger entities, that city entities or others, water entities. The idea is this would be the graduation of our public space learnings over the last 10, 12 years of UCD public space experiments. And by treating people, as many people as we can with dignity and respect, we tend to get that back in our spaces. And we would use that same policy here at the West Philly Waterfront. And
Chris has been speaking about the role that the riverfront ecology can play in our design, but also what we may be able to do to bring attention to and augment that ecology. Being in the floodplain, we're used to that, having built structures that move people around all over the place in this floodplain before. And mentioned the embodied carbon piece, equitable investment. Here's one of the biggest questions, right? Why invest here and not somewhere else? Or it's this, well, if we only have $10, why would we spend some of them here? And it's really kind of an attitude shift that we all need to embrace, which is, does the investments at Sister Cities Park or at Dilworth Plaza, did they come at the cost of public pools elsewhere? I don't think so.
Or was it more like a tide that lifted everything up and made people respect water more?
And the idea of what can this place do that other places can't do as well, this place can serve the whole city really well. And so that's why investing here can be a really great idea. Now, of course, we do need to go through the process of figuring out exactly what we should be building and that kind of thing. But it does seem like an investment here can be shared by many in a way that is really important to consider. And it's not a zero-sum game. It's not.
Zero-sum mentality frustrates me to no end. And so we have to realize that by doing one thing, something else does not have to get worse. That is not how the world works. A lot of people's brains do that to their minds and they start thinking these things, but we don't believe that. We believe more when you show that there's something positive, it can lift up those community pools. It can make people think more about their neighborhood pools and those types of things, not sacrifice them, not make them worse off as a result. And one of the things that to prove that this was just a feasibility study, we do not have this all figured out, despite AECOM's incredible artistic abilities to render these ideas as if they're finished products. It is just a dream, just an idea at this point. We haven't even thought about what to do in winter. And so we're waiting to get the community feedback from, hey, what do folks want to see out here in the winter? We don't want to suggest what it should be. We need the folks to tell us. And so you're the first folks that we're throwing that question out to. So I hope you come up with some ideas of what you want to see in the winter, those types of things. So I can't believe you missed your chance to say Riverine Ecology. You don't get to say that every day.
No, but it's but we also know that if we do move down with stakeholder input towards an actual swimmable pool, that there's a whole lot of operations and needs and basically ramifications of that decision that are going to have to be dealt with along the way too. So we're not naive about that, but it's important to note that things of that scale and that magnetism are important.
Yeah, and think about lifeguards. Could this be a place where lifeguards are trained? The inequities in the history of who knows how to swim. Could this be a place where all folks are welcome to learn how to swim? Those types of things where we can sort of help right some of those wrongs in the history of public pools.
And we kind of touched on the idea of, like, we've had people ask us, why not get all the way down to the water? Why do all of this and not touch the water? Well, we want to, but it's getting all the way down there comes with, it's something we still need to think through, but it comes with an awful lot of consequences when you do. And that whole idea of the barge and floating and the things that have been done in other cities just don't make as much sense as we might like them to make at this particular site on this river. So what to expect next? There's active fundraising at this moment.
If you know anybody with some cash, I'm willing to talk.
The goal is to spend the next year in kind of doing the design work and engaging with stakeholder groups to kind of pick up where we are, but to beat that up and make it real and get to the point where we have really strong schematic ideas that have been vetted with regulators. And then go through another year of final design and much of the permitting process, and then be building this and finishing the permitting over the 2 years following that. So aggressive, but that's where you have to be at this stage.
But this is a firm that has achieved a few permits to build things in waterways without destroying the waterways. And so we're very excited for that.
Yeah, I think, Doug, you brought up a really good point. Like the things that we take for granted along the east side of the Schuylkill River, that they were the product of some pretty robust vision and
So like even like the image about the river, and they showed like the spot where we are in between the industrial and the natural. It didn't happen by accident, right? The Schuylkill Banks Trail, I mean, in the life of Philadelphia is a very recent phenomenon. When I first moved to Philadelphia in 2003, the construction had just started, I think. So but even then, I remember it was, I don't know, it was mildly controversial from my point, at least from like Friends of Planning School. It was who wants to run alongside the garbage train, right? That gets parked on Conrail against Logan Square neighborhood.
Remember when CSX did that? They parked the garbage train.
Everybody remember the garbage train?
Like, no one's going to want to run on this
right?
if we park our garbage trains here.
Yeah, so I mean, there was a tremendous amount of vision and thought that went into that. And it is a long game, but I think it's a worthwhile precedent for us to look at, to think that, like, you know, we shouldn't be afraid to be ambitious in places where it counts, where it really matters, where the stakes are high. So I think it's encouraging that, you know, is now something that I think many of us in the room could not imagine not existing, which is the Schuylkill River Trail.
600,000 people that have used it so far this year.
Yeah,
Really
I mean,
agree.
highly encourage you, if you don't like, to pull up. DVRPC has a great website with the pedestrian and bicycle counters. You know, they have around the region, around the circuit trails. And when you see the numbers on the Schuylkill Banks Trail, it is amazing. I mean, they are head and shoulders above, and it just, they're right there. They're right across the river from where we're talking about here. So.
And that's all we got. So we're hoping there's some lively discussion occurring after this. We think we maybe made you ask a couple questions. So fire away. Nothing's too hard for this crew.
So, it sounds very good, but I remember when they were building the port by the Pegasus station, they told us how big it was going to be. But if you go there now, it's taken over by on house speed. So you have to think about maintenance too.
Mhm.
And not say you're going to DC, or Pegasus station, you cannot come out and want to do the food on the port.
Yeah, the Kensington clear out has been really tough for us at our spaces at the porch, but that's absolutely the governance and stewardship that we use in all of our spaces, where we treat folks with dignity and respect and try and get them help, try and connect them to services. That would be exemplified here at the West Philly Waterfront, of trying to bring as many folks in, but also trying to help those folks that maybe life is a little bit tougher for them. So absolutely, that's a very good observation, and something we care deeply about. Despite our current struggles at the porch at 30th Street, I will acknowledge that is a very difficult situation we are dealing with at the moment.
You want to give it to me? I got the mic, so thank you, Eli. Amazing. I love it. I just wanted to comment on one thing that I thought I'm surprised about, which is more water in the actual park itself. Given that it's a riverfront destination, I just kept looking at like the holes that you had, and I kept thinking, what about water pouring through them? What about a park that is celebrating the water and even the change in the elevations? I was thinking about waterfalls along that art wall that you showed. Like, what if water was just like, sort of trickling down that? And so like, that was the one thing that I've thought is, even when I saw the schematics, I was thinking, it's odd. It's like, I get the idea of the beach, but it's like, where's the water? And the pool being so artificial. The other comment I have, I really can see you're thinking about all of this. Recently, I moved our offices and I walk daily through Dilworth Plaza these days, and I am just stunned at what a leveler, a spray field is.
Yeah.
Like, there's no, I was thinking about it just today. I've been not even thinking about this presentation. I was like, nobody's going to drown unless they actively spray the water up their noses. Families are all out there by the dozens and hundreds just enjoying themselves. And even now at JFK Plaza, you've got the same thing at Love Park. So anyhow, spray parks versus pools and just water everywhere. I mean, water is art. Think of that.
Yeah.
If you want art, how about water art?
Hey, maybe we can have more water. I like it.
I love it all. And part of the reason that I love it is because I grew up in London, moved Boston, teenager years, New York. Then all of a sudden our pandemic was over. I had a baby during the pandemic. I was like to my husband, we got to move. I've been doing some things virtually in Philadelphia and it looks great. And I was like, wow, I've lived on the Northeast for this long and I've never been there. So I took my 3-year-old we had a Indian wedding in Seattle. I was like, how do I make the most of this? Him and I flew to Portland, drove to Oregon, and then drove up to Seattle, Bellingham. And my husband was like, are you serious? But yeah. And I have to tell you, I was like, I'm going to drive as far as I can. And then when he wakes up from his nap, we're going to stop everywhere we stopped. Olympia, Bellingham. There was just these things that we were stumbling upon, these waterfront parks, like built into the landscape. I didn't even have to go on to like Google or Pinterest or Eater 38. You know, I was like, there's restaurants, there's this. And so I think, you know, this is just such a great idea because so many people get so used to their little either boroughs or whatever, and Philadelphia is a place to be explored as well as the whole Northeast. And this whole like using it all year round is also like there's so much opportunity, like ice skating rink, whatever. So bravo. And one of the reasons I love taking my kid to sister cities, you might disagree with me on this, is that he can be barefoot in some of the areas, you know, like
it's a wonderful thing.
and that's really nice when you live in Fishtown.
Nice. Well, you're new to Philadelphia and coming to DAG events. Good for you.
One of the things that you see at a lot of waterfront areas are boat docks, which attracts people in and whatever. I don't see them there. I'm sure that you talked about it, and I'd like to find out what the discussion was and what the conclusions were, and whether that's something that might change as we go forward.
It's a tricky one. And one of the things we had to deal with the resilience of this site. And that requires a certain amount of height above the river. But team, take it away.
I mean, I think we all started from a point of, we want the kayaks to pull up and dock and people to get out and enjoy this. So that was the starting position. We were worried more at the beginning about, well, if a barge is necessarily this thick, how are we gonna get back to, I mean, it was very much about touching the water originally. And we all like where this has gone for a variety of reasons, but we are still craving that moment. So I think it's something we're gonna continue to look at. We wanted to make sure that what we had to do was get to a point where we weren't reliant on that, or that moment wasn't driving everything else that was happening here, because it was, while it's something we really want, it's one of those verbs that we want to make happen. So many of the other things that we needed to do were made easier to do by moving away from the water a little bit. So is there a third deck that is somehow floating, that is much smaller and isn't going to take out a bridge if it gets dislodged? Does that have to be ADA accessible? All of those questions are coming next.
Now something we all need to think about. Will my project knock down a bridge? Yes. Bob, go ahead. Oh, sorry. Oh, I'm sorry, I called him up, but.
Yeah, I'm a big advocate for increasing tourism. And I would expect that this could be a tremendous tourist draw. So how would you go about letting tourists, getting tourists in?
Yeah, well, I love a Laurie Olin quote of Paris is designed for Parisians and people love it. Las Vegas is designed for tourists and nobody really likes Las Vegas. And so I think if we design this for Philadelphians, make it the most amazing place possible, then it starts to be the kind of thing people want to come and see and be part of it. I imagine this becomes part of flyovers during sporting events, and they show active things happening in the space. And so more people are like, wow, where is that? Where is that? And so we think if we can do a good enough job to make Philadelphians feel comfortable there, it can take on some guests if it needs to, but it's first and foremost for West Philadelphians specifically, since they have so little access to the water. But of course, we would love visitors to come. Any good public space can take a lot of different users from a lot of different places, and we would certainly welcome all visitors.
Thank you. This is really creative. I've been working on this part of the river for 50 years, as you know, and I've observed.
Thanks for all your hard work.
Well, it's a real reward after so many years to see so many things happening that people thought were ludicrous. And so there's nothing to fear, you can do it. But I was just reading about the White Pass and Yukon Railroad, and the guy that engineered that said, give me as much dynamite and souse as I want, and I could build a railroad to hell. you know, so you can do it. But there's some things that you could add in. Which
That's a
would really-
can-do attitude right there.
Yeah, there you go, boy. What an engineer. No, but there's some things. When we formed the Tidal Schuylkill Committee of the Schuylkill River Greenways, which is still around, one of the things we said, we need to have docks in the tidal area. So we identified the Waterworks, Walnut Street, Bartram's Garden, Fort Mifflin. They did go into Fort Mifflin, whatever. And what am I doing on June 30th? I'm taking a boat, you know, for my sister's birthday because the docks are there. So yes, docks that rise up and down, you know, et cetera, you know, can be done. You know, the technology. And I do think that the connectivity of the river, you know, letting people get there is really important.
Okay.
The other thing is the drawings that were done early on for Schuylkill Banks showed restaurants. There aren't any. You can go from the Cosmic Cafe at the Waterworks all the way down to South Street.
There's nothing.
And you can't buy a stick of gum.
Our hope is that there is a restaurant in the sandwich layer. So in between the two decks.
Well, and that's important for a couple reasons. One, food, which always attracts people. But the other is, you know, you asked a very good question about the winter. And the thing I observe, I live in Powelton Village. How did I get to work this morning? Over the West Bank Greenway, Spring Garden Bridge down, Schuylkill River Trip, out to the bike lane on Pine Street, down to 15th South Row offices. So I do this for other routes all the time. And what is really important is that there's a through amount of traffic, 12 months a year, 365 days a year, 366 a week. There are people there. Even on a day when you wouldn't want to sit down and recreate, because it's literally, I have photos of me on the trail with bicycles.
Yeah, the wind whips down there.
Yeah,
in
but
winter.
because people are going through, and you know, if you look back, the huge battle with CSX. Yep. They didn't want grade crossings. And, you know, I was in the lawsuit on that, and, you know, our group, and it's still around, that was critical because it would have been a dead end park. You know, the only place in is at one place. You couldn't get out anywhere else. Nobody would go there. But the other thing I've observed also in looking at parks is that in the management, there's some things that just require staffing.
Yeah.
A good example is we have an incredible investment in public transit. We have a group that took some space. We have a shared office space that we've had for 40 years. And a whole bunch of the interns are coming in from South Philly, Bella Vista. They were complaining about the buses. I said, well, you know, there's a subway. I don't feel safe riding. You know, and then I came out of the Kimmel Center, and I said to my wife, I said, gee, it's pouring. You know, we can walk up and catch the subway. It's blocked off now. You come out of the Kinder Center, there's no, you know, and there were people looking to find the Lindenwald line. You know, you talk about bringing people in. Oh, well, that's all sealed off now. But it sends a horrible message. It's also a pain in the neck. So part of it is thinking about the through routes and how you do that. The boats are one. But the other thing in the wintertime is the work that was done to put some recreational areas along the parkway, right? At 16th Street, right, where you have the, what is it, Paul Cray Cafe.
Oh, right.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's a place I meet people all winter because it has an exposure to the sun. And I'll say, well, let's get there after 11:30 because the sun will be coming in at that angle. And that works. Having a place that becomes like a shelter, like if you're on the Appalachian Trail, it could be miserable weather, but if there's a lean-to, you can sit there. And it's like the shade that you talk about. But then in the winter, you really need a place that's warm and comfortable. And, you know, so building that into that, especially because the other thing you have to look at is the lower level is great, but it has unless you have a real attractor, it has the real risk of becoming a dead end park. Yeah, we got a lot of people on a nice day in the summer. The other days when you walk down there, I don't know, aren't too many people. Yes, you have to have things that attract. Look at what happened in San Antonio, the Riverwalk.
The Riverwalk, sure. Transform that city.
Well, look at what it was. Now everybody, oh, great river. Well, look what it was there. It was all these buildings. Way down below is this river that flooded all the time and caused damage. And they came up with the idea of doing that. And it's lined with restaurants and, you know, there are people eating, going down for dinner right now, you know, whatever. So that's something that has to be looked at also, is activating it year round. And a lot of it is a sense of food and protection in the summer with the shade, protection in the winter by having a warm space where you look out at all this wonderful stuff. And so as you add that in, that may help to answer your question
That's fantastic.
on the other
feedback.
9 months. Yeah.
Thanks, Bob.
Okay. Well,
wonderful.
keep up the good work.
Thank you.
Hi. Hi. I had a question about the co-benefits of this park. I think the co-benefits that you outlined for residents and for visitors was really clear, but I was curious about some of the ideas I'm sure you've had as you work through the designs, or what are the co-benefits ecologically speaking, or from an urban planning standpoint, that you could share with us. I think of how you mentioned the trash train, right? So if you build a park here, people will probably demand that the trash train goes away, which is a co-benefit to the city. Or like in New York, for example, Domino Park is built so that it can accommodate a ferry in the future, or that the Plus Pool is going to filter the East River water. So I'm curious what kind of ideas you floated around, and not immediately, but maybe in the next 10, 15 years, if it exists, what could come out of it?
I'll start on the co-benefits of the ecological co-benefits. Originally, especially when we were down closer to the water with the barge, I mean, we really did have much more of this thought of how could this be like an active filter? We are close, we're getting contact to the water. We're going to use this water like, as part of, the irrigation system. Are we creating like a, tidal marshes up on the deck? Are we just somehow providing some kind of benefit to water quality? That becomes a little bit harder now that we've really as Ryan's already alluded to, this the challenge is just the vertical drop. But it doesn't, so I think that right now anyway, the ecological story is really about the leverage and the positioning of this as a civic point where you can begin to see the river, and like up on the deck, we might be able to do some smaller interventions that maybe we are, say, pulling some Schuylkill water up to do the planters, or, but the structure itself has an opportunity to be some kind of refugia for fish. I mean, there's definitely migratory fish in this system. There's a lot of effort that's happening with mussels within, really within the region. And with Bartram's, I think they have a new mussel hatchery. So those I think are points that we need to explore further. I mean, one thing is like we think about ourselves trying to want to get out of the sun. I mean, aquatic organisms that are, sessile or not sessile, but mobile, they're able to, they want to get out of the sun too. So like this could be a great refugia spot, especially out of the current. So, maybe it's just some underwater habitat that we're looking at. But aside from that, I think that it is the co-benefits really of like respite, cooling, heating, maybe, finding a warm spot as Bob brought. And then I think all of these kind of social benefits that might happen from looking at really Philadelphians in context to their whole system, because it really, Philadelphia is here because of these rivers. I mean, its position, this is central because this is at the head of the tide. This is where you had commerce. This is where you were close to the Piedmont, and you had all that energy of, of the gravity, powering mills. So like just trying to pull together, I think all of that history. I mean, I don't know if you can do it all in this one spot, but I mean, there's a lot of opportunity, and we need to curate what it's gonna tell, I think.
No, well said. There's lots of different things we're trying to bring together and make sure that they fit harmoniously with each other. If we harness the kinetic power of the river to generate renewable electricity, does that come at the cost of an ecological benefit we could do too? So that's the fun part we have in front of us.
I think simply just having something like a 2-level park instead of a very utilitarian, ugly highway as you're approaching West Philadelphia becomes the kind of thing, even if you never interact with this and you're just walking past or biking past or driving past it, you feel a sense of pride that there's something nice here, and I'm glad I live here. So that kind of thing, even if you never interact with this, just seeing it could benefit your psyche and make you feel like, this is a place I'm happy to live.
I'm gonna take two more. Got one here and one over there, and I think we have to wrap.
Again, thank you for your creative ideas. Maybe this was just hinted at. My thought is for, again, a closer contact with the water so that you can go fishing. And that's a year-round activity almost that can be engaged upon every time.
Definitely not a use we want on the lower level. Kids playing fish hooks and cheeks. So that's a good idea. We have a lower level, we can have more fishing spots. I like that. And a different user group, but fishermen are a different type of person. Yeah, that's great feedback. We are hearing clearly that we need to figure out how to get people closer to the water.
Hi, I think this has potential to be a rather iconic site. You mentioned like when they have sporting events, sometimes you'll see things around the city. I remember when the Phillies were in the playoffs, I think right before the World Series, about a year and a half or so ago. I was watching on TV. I don't know, must have known Fox or something because I don't have cable, but I remember a couple times they would have aerials. So once they were at Deworth Park, and another time they were at I guess what was the Spruce Street Harbor Park and what they call Summerfest over there. And each time I didn't recognize them at first. And I kind of thought, where exactly is that? What city is this in? And think, oh, wow, that is here. That's here in Philadelphia. So it's as if I saw both those places for the first time because even though I recognized them and I knew where they were, I had forgotten that, and I've seen them for the first time, and the way other people see them when they, haven't been here, didn't know they existed, and then they see that on TV and think, wow, that looks really great. Anyway, so one thing I want to bring up is the issue we probably haven't thought of at this stage is programming for this site. This will probably be a place that will have all sorts of events for just about every holiday. You can imagine maybe people out there for 4th of July, if there's a good view of the fireworks, that might become an annual thing. There might be other special annual things. There'll be maybe farmers markets, crafts markets, and yoga on the river and things like that, like they do on the Ray Street Pier. And when you talk about having year-round activity, one of the best inspirations for that is what you have, again, at Penn's Landing at what they call Winterfest. It uses the same tents that they have and the same rink they have for that Summerfest. And this may not be like, a year-round, but have a tent or something like that that would cover over part of it. And have this nice big indoor thing with a couple fireplaces and whatever like you have over there. And that would become a possibility to use it year-round. And I imagine they could have all these big holiday events and different things, a tree in the middle and things like that. That might become again annual events and things for all the autumn holidays, but then culminating around your Christmas, New Year's, and all the many other holidays you have around that time, and then maybe even continuing during winter because you have like a nice tent or something like that. I mean, just almost around the corner they have those big bubbles over at Penn Park that keep them busy year round, and it's like you kind of anticipate seeing them go up in the fall and come down in the spring. And so that you could have the indoor thing that Bob mentioned, and then maybe expand on that with like a nice tent or something that would cover over a big part of that, where you'd even keep the spray park going, but probably not. I mean, you wouldn't have the spray park at all in the winter if it was all outdoors, and the pool might be closed or something. Or maybe you could have a tent going over the pool or something like that. Keep it open during the winter, and maybe have a nice heated pool or something.
I love it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
One thing, programming note, just riffing off of your idea with the tent and programming. I mean, this is like one of those things too, where like, how does that programming fit into the system? How does this thing really add value? So like an example idea that we've just like kicked around in the month since we joined the project is that in Philadelphia, so we have, I think 70 plus public pools, outdoor public pools. It's more per capita than any city in the country. And one of the biggest challenges of opening those pools, other than money, which is a big thing, but is just training and finding enough lifeguards to staff all of those pools. And to train lifeguards, you have to have a place to train them in the late winter and early spring. And right now, I think there's like one public site in the Northeast in the whole city. Sayer Pool, which is deeper into West Philadelphia, was another site, but that pool closed down and it's owned by the school district, leased by Parks and Rec. There's a lot of great advocacy around it, but I think it's a long ways before that opens up again. So if you were to, like, these are the kinds of opportunities that like we're starting to think about and we're going to ask the community about. But you know, what if you did have a pool here and you had a tent and the water was heated, all of a sudden you have this super transit accessible, really great location to train lifeguards, which would help support the whole rest of the pool system. So just a window into like some of the things that we've talked about, but I think there's a lot of great programming opportunities, big and small.
Yeah, and also on programming, we know from our experience, that's how you get folks to think, I belong there. If you have events that cater to certain crowds, that invites those folks in. So we're firm believers that programming is very necessary. It can get overdone a little bit, but the idea of bringing people in, bringing disparate groups together by different events that you have at the space, even if it's, you know, free to the users, but costs some money to us because the performers have to get paid, that kind of thing. But programming is super important when you're teaching folks how to use a space and to show like, hey, you're going to be treated well here. You're not going to be, kicked out or shushed along, all that kind of stuff. And so we're firm believers in the value of programming.
With that, please join me in giving our team here a round of applause. Thank you, everyone, for coming out. We'll be back here July 18th. So go to our website, designadvocacy.org. Oh, Nate has giveaways.
We have sunglasses from UCD. On one side says West Philly Forever, and the other side it says universitycity.org. So please come grab some free sunglasses.
Could I have our panelists hang out for a second? We're going to do a quick photo.
Should we all wear sunglasses?